Hi, I'm Tree and this is Stitchless TV. Now today on Stitchless TV we are going to make nurses scrubs. First of all we're going to make just the classic simple top with two pockets here, a V-neck with facing and sleeves. Oh, and slits at the side. Now the pattern that we're using today is this So Different free nurses scrubs sewing pattern. You can go to their website, download the pattern for printing onto A0 paper. Now most of us don't have A0 paper at home, so what we have to do is you send that file to your local printers and they will print it for you. The printers that I use are Vneck printer, who are an online company, and Orbit Imaging UK. Both of those print companies are completely familiar with printing the So Different Nurses Scrubs pattern. You can also get Scrubs PDF download pattern from the Facebook group For the Love of Scrubs, which is the most amazing resource for making scrubs. Obviously before you sew, you do have to cut out all your pieces. So I'm just going to quickly talk you through a few things. Now I'm actually making this for a specific nurse. So you've got to cut out one front to a fold, one back to a fold. This is for the top. You have to cut out two sleeves, one facing, front V-neck facing to a fold, one back facing to a fold, and then you cut out 4 of the patch pockets. So when you want to shorten the pattern, you don't do it down at the hem, because we've got these side slits with this extra bit that forms the facing at the side. So shorten your pattern more between the armpit and the side slit. Shorten it in that area. I want you to get your front sewing pattern and your back sewing pattern. Now in order to make my back fit, I've actually done it in 2 pieces and added a seam allowance, but your back was cut to a fold, okay? So I want you to open those out. So let's open up the back first. So I want you to put your front and back right sides together. Now your fabric may not have an obvious right and wrong side, but decide which one is going to be the right side and put them together. You put them together at the shoulder, you line up on the sleeve edge, and then you'll see there'll be a little overlap there on the curve of the neck. 1 centimetre seam allowance for Laura's pattern. If you're using another pattern, then you really must check the seam allowance. Now, I'm going to be finishing off all of my seams with an overlocker. Don't spend loads of times doing flat felled seams unless you've got a special foot, and French seams. They need these scrubs. So, you know, just use pinking shears or leave it, because with most of these fabrics, it's really not going to make a difference. Now, I don't usually use pins, but I've put them so you can see where you've got to sew. So I want you to sew along that shoulder and then sew along the other shoulder. Remember to do it to both sides, and when it's done it will look like this. Now I'm going to overlock the edges of my seams, but you can use pinking shears, or do you know what, you can leave it because they need these scrubs. Right, then you need to get the front facing and open it out so you can have a look at it. Front facing and the back facing. And again, you need to put it right sides together. So you put it right sides together. And you're going to do exactly the same thing. You're going to stitch up the shoulders, the exact same seam allowance that you did for your top. So, forwards and back, line up everything, backwards and forwards at the end, do the other side as well. So I'm treating you as if you are not necessarily that experienced, because I want this to be available to everyone, okay? So when we sew, we always have our fabric to the left, so you'll be flipping it over and doing it on the other side now, but it's the same thing. Right, so this is what we have so far. So now what I need you to do is open out your front and your back so we're on the right side. I'll turn it around. So you're on the right side, and we've got the V-neck at the front and we've got the back at the back. Now I want you to get your facing and put it right sides with that fabric. Push the shoulder seams towards the back and using pins, start matching everything up. So you get everything pinned in place. Now, really, I probably should have added iron-on interfacing to this facing, but I just wanted to get on with it. Otherwise, you could have stabilising tape going along here, but I don't really think I need it. So I've pinned it around the neck and down the V, making sure the key bits line up, the shoulders, the V there, and at the back. Now, probably because I did this French seam down the back when I joined my pieces together, it was just a tiny bit big, my facing, but I can absorb that in. So I've started somewhere at the back. I'm sticking to the So Different 1 centimetre seam allowance-ish. And I'm making sure everything is lovely and flat before I start moving to do the sewing. So carefully around the bend. We're coming to the front. Now the front, because it's a V-neck, it comes down, cutting slightly on the cross of the fabric, so it could stretch. So sometimes people would put stabilising tape there, or if you did do interfacing on your facing, that would have helped. But if you just let the sewing machine feed the fabric and don't do any stretching, like really don't do any stretching, you should be okay. Now, I think it's quite helpful to do a fold on your facing before, because then you can see exactly where the middle is. So as I come down, as soon as I hit that middle, I can pivot the needle. Now I think it's good to just have one stitch there, just one stitch, because points are very rarely completely pointy points. Now I'm going to come up on the other side, same seam allowance, same, being really careful not to stretch the V, making sure everything is flat, and then coming back to where I started with my seam allowance being pushed towards the back. I'm not sure I said that. Come around the bend, and then I'm over stitching where I started. So that's the journey of sewing a facing to a neckline. Now I've got to show you how we snip into our curves and our point. Most important of all is to super carefully snip down, and if you did that little stitch thing, go into the corner there, and then wherever there is a curve, we're supposed to go at right angles, wherever there is a curve, you must snip up to, but not over the stitch line, so right up to. So I've got a curve on this side as well. Excuse my dry hands, I'm currently my 82-year-old mum's carer, so I'm doing lots of hand washing. Right, in doing that, that means that you can easily turn the facing around to the other side and everything will sit beautifully. Now, I wouldn't necessarily always do this, but I think you probably want to see this, so I'm going to do it, because I know that most of these fabrics that we are using will be fine once they're pressed. The facings will sit back. But I think you might want to see how to do the understitching, so I'm going to show you that. So understitching is used to keep the facing in place, and it's not top stitching. What you're doing is you're pushing your seam allowance towards your facing, and then you are stitching just on the facing quite near to the edge, not on the actual top. Decide how far you're going to be away and try to stick to it. So we go forwards and back, and we are not sewing on the top, we're sewing on the facing. We've pushed our seam allowance towards the facing and we're sort of pulling the fabric away and trying to stay straight. Now I'm in a very awkward position here, but I'll try. You push all your seam allowance towards your facing, make your fabric tight. Oops, it is kind of tricky going around the bend. And then just make your way all the way down to that V, but you don't have to go tight, tight, tight into the V. So when you've pressed it, this is what you end up with. So on the right side, it's nice and flat. Okay, now you can top stitch it. If you do top stitch it, you can come down, come across, and then come up the other side, and you can follow the edge of the facing. I haven't decided if I'm going to top stitch mine or not, but if you are a novice sewer, I'd say don't necessarily top stitch, because if it goes wrong it doesn't look very nice. But you do need to make sure you stay stitch this facing down, so just stitch in the well of the seam there and do it from the right side. So the technical term for this is stitch in the ditch, and you usually use this stitch in the ditch foot, but in case you haven't got one, I'm not going to use one. So you make sure everything is flat, and the idea is you pull the seams apart as much as you can and you stitch in the ditch. Now you don't really need to go backwards and forwards. This isn't really a stress point, but I'm going to go backwards and forwards at the end there. Now do the same on the other side, but look, it looks like this. So I've taken the arms off my Royal Dress Form gorgeous pinnable dummy. Sorry. Just so you can see how well it sits. So it's all nice and flat, no stretching on the V part of the neckline, which could be susceptible to stretching. And I still haven't decided if I'm going to trace out the facing and top stitch it. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to do the inset sleeves, but we do it in such an easy way that honestly anybody can do it. This is how to do a really easy inset sleeve. That's when the sleeve is set in to the armhole. So I'm going to take the pattern off, but I need to keep track of what's the right side and the wrong side. I cut my fabric, so I've got the wrong side on the inside. So the sleeve I'm not using, I'm folding up like that, and I'm going to put it away. Now something else that I did in advance is I created notches, 2 notches that signified the back, and 1 notch that means it goes to the front. And I also transferred them onto the pattern at the front, and I've done a notch which is for the top of the sleeve head, because I like notches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the notches and line up the edge of the sleeve and just see how it feeds around. Now this is just a relaxed sleeve, so it's up to you. If you want to, like on other projects, I would just do a large stitch there and ease the head of the sleeve. But for this, I really don't think it requires it. But I'm just going to put, for your sake, not for mine, a pin at the kind of key bits. Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to put a pin at the top, okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to sew from the top down, and then I'll turn it around and we'll sew the other way. So let's do that now. So I've started at the top. I'm not going backwards and forwards, and it's a regular straight stitch. Switch on my machine because that actually helps. And I'm just going to slowly, no stretching, start making my way down the sleeve. My fabric is right size together. You can't see that because they're both the same. Now before I get there, I want to know where I'm going. So for you, if you haven't done any notches on your sleeve, just stick a pin for where it's going to be the end. But for me, I've got the reassurance of having that notch there, which signifies the front. And now I'm just going to whiz down, and when I get to the notch, line it up, make sure all my fabric is flat. Take pin out. And just go to the side seam. And backwards and forwards at the end. Now then we do just exactly the same on the other side. Now, because our fabric has to be, do you want to have a look at it? You look, there you go. Is it all fitted in perfectly? So for the other side, we've got to flop the fabric over, and we're now going to be sewing on the other side. So once again, just stick a pin where you're meant to be going. Now you might want one more pin somewhere, but you know, you don't have to overdo the pins. Now I haven't used this pattern before, and it is just a quick sew pattern. But I am just going to tell you something that will be worth you knowing, all right? Now with my fabric it's going to be okay. So the sleeve is quite rightly just a little bit bigger than the armhole, because really usually you would ease the head of the sleeve first. So I'm starting at the other end down there now because I want to see how the fit is going to be, because I'm not really supposed to be stretching anything. So have a little look at that. Looks okay. Backwards and forwards at the end, so you want to have a look at that. Okay, so look, that's absolutely fine, especially when you press it. Well, I don't know if we're going to be pressing. I'm pressing, but you may not have time to press because they need these scrubs. So there we go. We've put our 2 sleeves, we've set our sleeves in, and now all we have to do is, if I just turn it over, match up the armhole side seams and match up the armhole side seams and sew down the side seam of the sleeve from the armhole and then down the side seam of the actual scrubs top. Now you need to stop at the place that it says to stop on the pattern because you're going to be folding these back so that they become side slits. But before we do any of that, it may sound strange, but I want to hem the front and the back, and I want to put the pockets on before we stitch up the side seams with the sleeves. So when you hem the front and the back of your scrubs top, you may want to do a little hem, press it, and then a bigger hem, like that. Right, so look what I did. I pressed a little hem. I know, I didn't need to overlock it. I pressed a little hem, and then I've pressed a bigger hem. And then what happens is, you need to sew just like 1 millimetre away from the edge of that bigger hem. Now I like to sew my hems from the top side and feel as I go, and I'll show you that now, but please feel free to sew from underneath. You'll want to know why I do it this way, won't you? I have found that if I sew from the top, then I don't get that effect. You know, sometimes when you pin and you sew and it bunches to the pin and it bunches to the pin, and when you get to the end it's all ski-whiffy. Well, if I sew from the top, and you have to press it in advance, right, I can sort of feel where it is underneath, unless it's really thick, or in fact even when it's really thick. So I'm feeling as I go, and I'm quite confident that I'm sewing in the right place, even though I'm at a very strange angle, so you can see. So there are no pins, I haven't got any bonder web or anything. I'm simply sewing where I can feel the ridges. I mean, it might take a little bit of practice, but look. So that looks fine, doesn't it? So do that on the front and on the back. This is where we're at now. So we haven't stitched up the side seams, but we have put the sleeve on. We have done the facing and we have done the hem. So now I'm going to show you something about doing the pockets. So, pockets. This is the stage that we want to get it to, where we've got it all pressed in, we've got these corner bits pressed in, and then it's ready to stitch onto our garment. So in order to get there, you cut out your fabric, don't you? But what's a really good idea is to get a template out of anything at all. Look, I've got it out of a trifle sponge packet. So get a template that is the size of the final shape of your pocket. So it might be a pocket that has curved at the bottom or goes in a pointy bit there. Whatever it is, have it as a template in card. And then what that means is, it means that when you press it, you can just press it around the template, and it just makes life so much easier. So I would say do all your pockets at once. Now, so what we've done here is, I've pressed a little hem, like we did on the hem of the top. And then I've pressed a bigger hem. And then I folded in the sides, pressed those, pressed there. But then these corner bits, which I need to go over, we've kind of mitered and then pressed it. And then take out your template and press it again, because it just makes everything much flatter. But then when you've done that, before you do anything else, you need to open this out and stitch across there. And then put everything all back again. And then to make it even easier, when I put this onto the garment, I cut Bonder web, which you're going to see in a minute, or maybe you won't. I cut Bonder web very, very thin rather than using pins. And when I'm happy that it's in position, I put like 2mm Bonder web down that side a bit, down that side and down that side. And then I press it to iron it into place. And then nothing moves, I just go in and I sew my pockets on. Now another way to do pockets is this, and I nearly did it for these. Right, so another way to do pockets to end up with a nice finish is, why don't you just bag out 2 pieces of material together? So this is a pocket that I'm going to have on the trousers. Okay, so I've done like a false flap. They'll be going in from there. And I've got an entrance hole here, which was for bagging it out. But when I stitch that on, you won't see it. I'll just stitch all around the edge there, go backwards and forwards there, let that flop down, and I'm not sure, I'll do some sort of bar tack thing there. So you can do pockets in lots of different ways, but we're using this method today. So I'll show you, that's really difficult to say, so I will show you how to sew it onto your top. Decide where your pockets are going to go. So bearing in mind that that will be stitched back to there, I think it could probably go something like that, and do the same here. See how I've pressed a line that shows me where the middle is? It just helps me with the alignment. I want to know where the middle is. So something like that, I think. So when you're happy with the position that you've chosen, cut Bonder web. That stuff that you get from when you buy curtains or something, and they give you it to glue the hem if you can't do sewing. So I'm just going to put it, look how thin it is. I'm just going to put it in a few key locations. It doesn't have to go all over it. But you have to be very sure that you are happy with the placement of your pocket. So I think that that's kind of good. So I'm using steam and heat. Lots of people say don't use steam, but I find it works better. So now my pocket's in place now, and then that will be an absolute dream to sew. I've got my white mitered bits, yeah? So now I'll do the other one as well and make sure that it's the same position on the other side. So I've started at the line at the edge. Just turn down my stitches, go backwards and forwards a little bit. I'm going to try and create a bit of a triangle there, and then lift your foot, turn your work around, and you're going to come along the top just to the corner, and then when you're at the corner, needle in, lift it up, turn it around, and now head down the side of your pocket.
Now look how it's all really easy, even though I'm in such a bad position, because it's basically glued into place, isn't it? So let me just stick my head in for now. Right, if my stitching's wobbly, it's because I'm really in the most ridiculous position. Right, so coming up the other side now. So I'm going to make sure everything's all nice. Oh gosh, it is wobbly. I'm going to make sure everything's all nice and flat. Okay, the next one will be perfect because I won't film it. Right, come up the other side. Stop at the corner, too far. Corner, lift, turn around, just a few stitches there. Might be too many, maybe that was 3 stitches. And then do the little triangle thing, and then go back to the edge.
So now we're ready to put the top inside out. We're going to sew from the armpit, first of all, from the armpit, pushing the seam allowance towards the sleeve at the front and the back. Start in the armpit and come down the sleeve, and then start in the armpit again and over sew where you just sewed, because then that reinforces it, and stop. So look, can you see on the pattern where Laura says to stop? So you stop the equivalent to that on your work and go backwards and forwards there, because that's where the slit is going to go. I'm starting in the armpit and I'm going to go backwards and forwards and around that little bit there, around the bend a bit there, and come down, straight down the sleeve and go backwards and forwards. Flip it over and over sew over the same line. So go backwards and forwards over the same line, which will strengthen that armpit, and come down the side seam with the correct seam allowance. Whoops. No, mine's getting a bit big. And then just stop wherever you think you should stop, and backwards and forwards on the side. Right, we've got a couple more jobs to do. One is make sure this is nice and pressed. So I'm on the wrong side at the moment. You can do it on the right side or the wrong side. Make sure it's nice and pressed with the little hem and then the big hem. And then you are going to stitch up, come across, down the other side. And then the other thing you should do, which is handy to do actually before we close here, is press the hem for your sleeve. So again, it's a little hem and then a bigger hem, and then you're going to stitch it all the way around. But let me just quickly show you how to do the slits. So here's our slit. You can do it from whatever side you want. Backwards and forwards at the bottom. And so when you think you're in line with the slit, lift it up. Oh, I'm not in line with the slit. Lift up the foot, spin it around, and you're aiming to go over the slit to the other side, and then down the other side. So this is what we're aiming for, something like that. Right, now I'm going to show you how to sew the sleeve, so the hem on the sleeve. So you will have already folded up a little bit of hem, okay? So I'm going to do this on the wrong side, because I know you'll want to do this on the wrong side. Now we can't pull off this part of our machine, so we will. And I've turned my top inside out. So I'm inside out. I'm going to put this over the machine. Now because I've pressed my hem, it should be really easy to sew. Right. And then if I grab it so it's flat, and and sew close to the edge, and I'm slightly pulling it as I go. Now, you know, use pins if you want, or use Bonder web. I would choose a little bit of Bonder web. And backwards and forwards at the end, and hopefully that's all perfect. So do the same to the other side as well, and then you're done. So there we go. I think that looks pretty good. I'm not going to try it on until I've done the trousers as well, which I'm going to do in the next video. So, nice V-neck. Still don't know if I'm going to top stitch it. Pockets, inset sleeves, slits at the side. Very nice. Now let me know if you want me to show you how to do another video on different types of necklines, because I do think it'd be nice to have a placket neckline like we have on our pontoon tier dress. Also, actually, on the No Patterns Needed video. So have a look at those, and if you still need me to do a video on showing how to do that for the nurses scrubs, comment below if you want me to answer questions about fabrics. I'll tell you what I know, but the best thing to do is go to For the Love of Scrubs, the group on Facebook. So look out for the next video, which will be for making the scrubs trousers with the drawstring and elastic, side seam pockets,